This is our kickoff for the 2022-2023 academic season of the Early Career Blueprint series. I'm Caitlyn Mooney. My co-moderator is going to be Lauren Poindexter, and our speaker today will be Carly Day. But we have a pretty good-sized panel as well to have a discussion. We'll have about the first 45 minutes to an hour be the panel and our discussion, and then usually the last half hour to even a little bit longer, we will turn off our recording and there'll be open discussion for networking, asking questions, anything else you want to discuss. So our topic for today is going to be gender diversity in sports medicine, which goes along really well with Women in Medicine Month. So, and just, oops, there's our panel. So I just wanted to do a quick introduction of our speakers and then a brief introduction of just the gender diversity in medicine in general. So to start out with, Dr. Carly Day is the head team physician for Purdue University Athletics. She is from Cleveland, Ohio, and graduated from Miami University, summa cum laude with honors. She completed her medical school and a PM&R residency at UVA while being, inducted in AOA. Dr. Day did a sports medicine fellowship at University of Utah and then worked at Cleveland Clinic for 7 years prior to assuming her current role at Purdue. She served on the board of directors for the AMSSM and was chair of the AMSSM's International and Interorganizational Relations Committee. She is a member of the NCAA COVID-19 Medical Advisory Group and a team physician for the U.S. Soccer Under-20 Women's National Team. And her research interests include mental health, sleep, and iron deficiency in athletes, as well as gender and racial diversity in sports medicine. Going on to our panel, we have Charlene Jones. She received her medical degree from Morehouse School of Medicine in Atlanta. She also completed a master's in public health at the Dartmouth Institute for Health Policy and Clinical Practice. She did her residency in pediatrics at St. Christopher Hospital for Children in Philadelphia before going to Lehigh Valley Health Network in Allentown, PA to complete her fellowship in primary care sports medicine. Did I see that you just changed jobs, Charlene?
Yes, I did. I just started at the beginning of the month at Christiana Care and their sports medicine department. So we are in all-female primary care sports medicine group. And we're also responsible for covering the athletes at the University of Delaware.
Congrats. Okay.
Thank you.
Dr. Angie Curtis is a pediatrician who's fellowship trained in primary care sports medicine. Her background as a physical therapist provides a unique perspective on injury evaluation, prevention, and treatment. She's a staff physician in the Department of Pediatrics at UT Health in Houston, Texas, and serves as team physician for a local high school.
I'm happy to introduce our next three panelists, Dr. Eliza Pierko, Dr. Stephanie Toe, and Dr. Amy West. So Dr. Pierko is an internal medicine physician who was born and raised in Poland. She obtained her medical degree in Poland from the Medical University of Białystok. She completed her internal medicine residency in Chicago prior to completing a fellowship in primary care sports medicine at Loyola McNeil Hospital, which is where she is now Associate Program Director of their Sports Medicine Fellowship. She currently acts as a team physician for Morton College, Loyola University Chicago, and multiple Chicago area high schools. Dr. Pierko in the past has been a physician for the Chicago Red Stars, the Chicago Sky, the Joffrey Ballet, and the Chicago Marathon. Her clinical interests include running medicine, female athletes, and ultrasound-guided procedures. Dr. Stephanie Toe is a PM&R physician who is dual fellowship trained in sports medicine and pediatric rehab medicine. That's a lot of years in fellowship. She is currently located in Denver, Colorado, and has a special interest in working with athletes with disabilities. She's the head team physician of the U.S. Paralympics swimming national team. She's also held multiple leadership roles nationally with AAPM&R, AMSSM, and AAC PDM. Last but not least, Dr. Amy West is a board-certified sports medicine physiatrist at the Northwell Health Orthopedic Institute. She received both her MD and Master of Education degrees from Harvard University. She then went on to complete her residency in physical medicine and rehabilitation at the Harvard Spalding Rehabilitation Hospital, followed by a sports medicine fellowship at Maine Medical Center. Dr. West is an assistant professor at Hofstra University in the Department of Orthopedics and PM&R. She currently serves as a team physician for Hofstra University and the CrossFit Games.
Do you want to introduce yourself too?
No. I'd be happy to. So as Caitlyn mentioned, I'm Dr. Lauren Poindexter. I am a PM&R board certified physiatrist. I completed my residency at UAMS in Little Rock and then moved to New York City during COVID to complete my PM&R Sports Medicine Fellowship at NYU. I've returned to Arkansas, where I'm one of the team physicians for the Razorback athletics teams. I'm also practicing at Arkansas Children's Hospital, as well as UAMS in the Department of Orthopedics.
And I'm Caitlyn Mooney. I'm at UT Health Science Center, San Antonio. I'm a team physician for University of Texas at San Antonio. And I'm also the co-director for the musculoskeletal module of the medical school here. So just an introduction, why I wanted to do these series is really to give young women physicians, but also men. We've always been open to men, but we thought the topics were really pertinent to women in a specialty that is very male dominated. So it's, like I said, it's Women in Medicine Month. And actually where I met Dr. Pierko was at the Women in Medicine Summit this last weekend. And it's a great conference if you ever get a chance to go there. But one of the things that I think about with sports medicine is we have the intersection of sports that is very male dominated. And then we have the intersection of medicine that has tended to be male dominated, despite the fact that 50% of med students are now women. But we see at the higher levels that there's still a lot more men at the senior levels of both sports and medicine, and then sports medicine together, we see that quite a bit. When I was at the Women in Medicine conference, they actually were applauding sports and how a little bit more equitable it is with the U.S. soccer teams. But I think if you really look at it, we have a long way to go to really having our athletes as well as our leadership being more equitable. So that's kind of where we're coming from with this specific talk. I also think that this is important both for our opportunities of everybody who's here. I think both sports and medicine, we've seen that also sports medicine isn't that equitable with different ethnicities, sexualities as well. So some additional things that also trickles down to less research into things that are specifically to women in sports. So dysmenorrhea in sports bra discomfort, even protective clothing and PPE have less research for women. And then I've recently been reading a blog and a podcast by Caroline Criado Perez called Invisible Women. And she highlights the disparities in sports medicine quite a bit as one of the more, a very bad part of medicine that doesn't do a lot of research in women. And of course, I don't want to see that there. In fact, this week, her highlight was concussion research. So I think our goal is to try to get much more equitable representation in our research, whether we're really looking into all of the specific issues for women in sport as well as women in sports medicine. So as we enter the space today of discussing this topic, I just wanted to introduce those sorts of things. And then I really want people to think about these things, and we're going to have some discussion at the end. So without any further introduction, thanks Dr. Day for being here, and I'm turning over control to you.
All right, hello everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm really interested in the perspectives of the other people on this panel. So I'm gonna go through this quickly. At the end, the articles that I reference will be in there if you wanna dig a little deeper. But just starting with a little bit of data on diversity in sports medicine, and then going over a paper on gender bias that we published this year. Go ahead, Caitlin.
Thank you.
So first, when we're talking about who provides sports medicine care, so who are your sports medicine physicians? And when looking at gender, this is in the NCAA head team physician. So this is a paper that me and my fellow published a couple of years ago. So for the fellows out there, she did this in 1 year and got a publication in JAMA, and she did all the legwork for this. So shout out to Caitlin Lewis for that. When you look at NCAA, go back, Caitlin. So when you look at head team physicians in the NCAA, it's about, back one. It's about 11% of head team physicians are female when you average division 1, 2, and 3, and there's not a significant difference between the divisions. When you look at the number of females at AMSSM, it's about 28%, 29%. So again, you can't really say you want everything to be 50-50. You know, realistically, you'd like it to at least represent the demographics of your field. So, you know, you'd think there should at least be about that 28, 29% females. You know, it'd be at least a nice starter goal. So less than half representation there. We also looked at athletic trainers. And when you look at athletic trainers, so to the left of your screen is assistant athletic trainers. And that was basically anyone who's not a head athletic trainer is considered an assistant athletic trainer in this data. And if you look in Division 1, your assistant athletic trainers are about 50-50 male and female. And then in Division 2 and 3, there's actually more females than males in athletic training. But when you look at the head athletic trainers, the people in a position of power, Division 1 is 80% of their head athletic trainers are male. And then, you know, 68% in Division 2 and close to 60% in Division 3. So while in Division 2 and 3, the majority of their assistant athletic trainers are female, the majority of their head athletic trainers are male. So you can see a mismatch there. So in summary, just looking at that data, so NCAA head team physician females are 11% and AMSSM females are 28%. And then when you look at the athletic trainers, in the NCAA head athletic trainer females are 32%, assistant are 52%. So next is the same category, but looking by residency. And there was something really interesting we found there. So when you look at the residency of the head team physicians as total, it's about the majority are orthopedics or family medicines, right? So 43% each. But within males, there's like an even split between ortho and family medicine, but in females, there's a large proportion of family medicine and a very small proportion of orthopedic female head team physicians. So that's something where orthopedic colleagues who are female actually really struggle to break through and become head team physicians in their field, even less so than the primary care females, which I find very interesting. Now, we had said who's providing care, but now who's teaching sports medicine, right? And this is a paper by Dr. Matson, who I think is on here today. So congratulations to her on this great publication. So I pulled a few points from there. So the first one was just when you look at the numbers. So your program directors are about 25% women, and then the APDs are about 35%. So that's actually not too bad when we're saying our, you know, society is 28, 29% female. One of the interesting things they did that maybe Dr. Poindexter can comment on, Caitlin, if you go to the next slide, is looked at regionally. And so for the program directors, I know this is hard to see, but for program directors, there actually wasn't really a big difference in these areas. So is it, you know, anywhere between 24 to 33%, you know, based on region. But your APDs in the South and Puerto Rico were only 13% female compared to the Northeast, which was 52% female. So big regional difference there, not as much for the PDs, but more so for the APDs there. They looked at sports medicine journals and what percent of the physicians on the board are female for the journals. And there's a variety, anywhere between 8 and 40. If you look at BJSM, they're 33% female. And then the other one was the ACSM Health and Fitness Journal was 40% female. And then lastly, they looked at the society board members and committee chairs. And actually, all three of these societies do a really good job of having female representation on their board and committee chairs. So if you look at AMSSM, it's 43% or 41% of their board members are female. AOASM is 35% and ACSM is 42%. So it looks like they are making strides in having female representation on the board. I do want to touch upon race and ethnicity. So we looked at this and just to understand that that really does matter as well. And we can't just focus on gender. So go ahead to the next slide, Caitlin. So when we look at AMSSM membership, it's about 75% white, and then the other 25% has a breakdown here. If you see, where actually the second most common is Asian, then Latino, and then Black, Middle Eastern, Hawaiian. So that order on your right is actually the order of who has the highest percentage in AMSSM. When we look at NCAA athletic trainers, and this is a paper we published in the Journal of Athletic Training that I did with some of my colleagues, it's really close to like 90% white for athletic trainers in the NCAA, right? So that's a pretty high percentage of white athletic trainers, not a big difference between head and assistant. Now, when you look at our student athlete population, the NCAA, they are more diverse, right? So it's only about 2/3 white, and then the next most common is Black, followed by Hispanic, Asian, and 2 or more races. When I put that right next, oh, sorry, go back, Caitlin. I put that next to the head athletic trainer pie graph just to give you a little bit of side to side to see how different it is, right? So student athletes are a diverse population. There's a little more diversity in AMSSM membership than the NCAA athletic trainers. And there is going to be some information coming out from a group that I'm working with on the NCAA head team position, race and ethnicity, but there's still obviously ways for us to go there. So this is something that Dr. Sukahara, who's one of my Japanese colleagues, and I put out with some of our friends. Melissa Novak helped out with it. She's an AMSSM member. Looking at gender bias in sports medicine. So you can go to the next slide. What we did is we surveyed sports medicine physicians and got responses from 32 different countries, had over 1,100 responses, had it translated into a bunch of different languages, and looked at physicians' perceptions of bias and harassment in sports medicine. So just to understand the participants, it was 380 were female, 813 were male. We had a lot of respondents from Asia and North America, but also some people from other areas as well. And primary residency training, there's the males was actually 47% orthopedics, where the females were 43% family medicine. But if you read the paper in depth, we did do a logistic regression analysis to try to control for some of those things. So some of the results I wanted to highlight. So let me just explain what this chart says. So what we asked the physicians is, have you felt disrespected or had your judgment questioned by the following groups? So for female physicians, 63.8% felt that male athletes had either disrespected them or questioned their judgment, where only 47% of male physicians felt that male athletes had questioned their judgment. If you look at male coaches, there was a big difference there, where 72% of female physicians felt like their judgment was questioned by male coaches, and only 48% of male physicians felt like their judgment was questioned. And then if you look at the male physicians in practice longer, again, more female than male physicians feel like they're having their judgment questioned. If you look at the yellow are all significant. So the only area where male and female physicians felt equally having their judgment questions was when they're interacting with female physicians in practice the same or less as them, and that was the lowest percentage of all of them. So most people don't feel like younger females are questioning their judgment. The next one we asked is if people had been sexually harassed by those same categories. And obviously this is pretty disturbing when you look at these numbers. So 18% of female physicians felt like they were sexually harassed by a male athlete, whereas only 1.5% of male physicians felt that way. And then you can see again, male coaches, male athletic trainers, and organization administration, those are there, but they're a little lower. But again, the biggest problem here is the biggest difference was in interacting with male physicians in practice longer than them. So 30% of female physicians felt sexually harassed by a male physician in practice longer than them. Again, so this is where our he for she, I know a lot of people on this are women, but hopefully, you know, in these YouTube views, we can get some males to look at it, because there's, you know, they're going to have to be the ones who help fix this. We can't do this on our own. So I want to read these out loud. They're actually a little bit disturbing, I hate to say, but they really took me aback. This is from Speak Up Ortho, which I know they have a Twitter handle, and they just had let people anonymously tell their stories. I'm just going to read them out loud. And I apologize that they're sensitive, but I just think that these stories need to be heard. So these are from females. So this is a female ortho resident who said, I was a fourth-year medical student on my audition rotations, and I was sexually harassed by not one, but two male residents from different programs. I received several messages from them expressing their interest to have sex with me, and one of them even sent a shirtless photo of them pulling down their pants, exposing part of their genitals. The kicker is that both of them were married. I felt I couldn't speak up to anyone regarding their behavior or even tell them off because I didn't want to ruin my chances at these programs. When it came time to submit rank lists, I was so disappointed that I had to factor in whether I could put up with sexual harassment to attend otherwise great programs. So think about how that's affecting the education of female residents, you know, and fellows and medical students, where they have to take this into account when they're choosing where they're going to go to school. Another one that even just gets me even more than that one is, this is from, again, a female orthopedic resident who said, I protected a male junior resident from an attending who was irate that he left early because he was extremely sick. I stood up for that resident and told the attending I sent him home because he was feeling awful. That attending told me, this is why women don't belong in an ortho residency. You're going to make everyone as weak as you. What he didn't know was that I was being treated for carcinoma in situ discreetly, but didn't miss a day of work despite 4:30 a.m. radiation treatments because I was worried people would think exactly that I was weak. The worst part, every time I look at that scar on my breast, I think about not how strong I was to get through the CIS, but I think of that attending and how small he made me feel. So I think we all need to remember that, you know, kindness is not a weakness, it's a strength, and you shouldn't think anything otherwise. So the last comment is just to talk a little bit about intersectionality. So, you know, I am a white cis female, and my experience is going to be different than a, you know, racial minority, than a sexual minority. It may be that a racial minority male has a very different experience than a racial minority female. There's different, you know, stereotypes that everyone has to face. So I just think it's very important to understand that, you know, whether someone has a disability, whether they come from a lower socioeconomic status, everyone has a combination of all these things that makes their experience unique. And that's why it's really important to listen to other people and understand their experience, and not just assume that you know the same thing because you're the same gender as them, because there's other parts of you that are not the same. So that's it. Again, you can look up these references, and anyone's always welcome to reach out to me with questions.
Thank you, Dr. Day.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much for just that wonderful data.
Okay. Let's move on to our kind of panel discussion. So let me get our questions out that we kind of brought up, but if anyone else has questions, please feel free to type in the chat. Lauren, can you help me monitor the chat if we're doing that too?
Absolutely.
I think one of the first questions I wanted to ask is for people on the panel, kind of I don't want to say an easy question because I think all of these questions might be a little bit difficult, but has anyone found a good way with dealing with when you notice that something is going, someone is either being treated unfairly at your institution for some sort of either gender related issue or race related issue? Since I don't think this one would be as personal as a question necessarily. I'll start a little bit with just kind of, I've tried to figure out who was an advocate at my institution when I noticed things coming up that I thought was not right. And for that, I've looked at people in my department who have been in leadership with the diversity and inclusion, and just talk to them for it, because I don't have to be the expert in dealing with those things. And I think knowing your resources is really important. Also at the Women in Medicine Summit this last week, one of the ways they said for dealing with kind of more microaggressions was just to mark it with an ouch by saying ooh or ouch, so that it raises awareness, especially when you're in a room with a bunch of people where you might not be, they might be talking about something that's not necessarily related to you, but you can mark that that wasn't appropriate. So they were talking, because it was the two males, one used to be in the Navy, they're talking about how, oh, I don't think we should invite that woman to be in this leadership position because she has children. So then another person could go, ooh, or ouch. And then you don't feel like you're actually calling the person out. It was an interesting way to do it. I've never personally done it. Anyone else have any ideas for that?
With regards to the microaggressions, I attended an ICL at FAMSSM this past year, and it was fantastic because the topic was microaggressions. I'm not sure if any of you attended, but it was wonderful. There was a lot of great discussion to be had. And I think one of the great things that sort of resonated with me was the comment, like you said, so say, you can say ouch, and then you can ask the person who made that comment, tell me what you mean by that, or tell me more about that comment. And so rather than the spotlight being on you and your emotions or your response to it, then it sort of puts the spotlight on them and just is kind of like, well, here's a chance for you to explain yourself. You know, tell me more. And it kind of gives them the opportunity to either walk it back or them to share more. Anybody else participate in that ICL or have additional comments on microaggressions?
Yeah, I was also fortunate enough to be at that session at FAMSSM this year, and it was so very well done. I think that they gave some really wonderful tips as far as different strategies to employ and things that we can think about ahead of time about how we would want to respond in those situations, especially if you're not the person who is being quote unquote attacked, you know, then you could hopefully be an ally, an advocate, somebody who can ask them like, oh, what did you mean by that? Or perhaps even pointing out, you know, even a comment like, oh, she has kids, like, oh, well, don't you have kids as well? What difference does that make, you know? And kind of deciding how you want to take that. You can, depending on the situation, you can kind of put it back on that person. If it's something kind of egregious, you can shut that down and say, hey, you know, that's not appropriate. And coming up with, you know, your own strategy for how to approach that situation.
So now hearing all these wonderful, you know, stories from that ICL, I'm really bummed that I missed it. But I feel like everyone has experienced microaggression and all different kind of biases here. And I agree with Caitlyn, the ouches, you know, and the powerful response for the room full of women, you know, at Women in Medicine Summit. It was amazing. It was over 400 of us outing, you know, to the role playing between two white guys on a stage. So I think I'm gonna definitely try to implement that one, but to go along with what Dr. Jones said and Dr. Poindexter, it might be easy now as attendings to try to take that, you know, attention off us and just play it back to someone who just put us on the spot. Early in the career, I honestly had no guts to do it. I mean, it does take courage, you know. I mean, as a medical student, as a resident, as a fellow even, Dr. Day just put some examples there. You know, you stand up for someone, you speak up, and then you're afraid that you're going to pay consequences for it. And when you think about your career and you really want to match into either residency or fellowship, you most likely going to shut up and you're not going to speak up. And the one thing that I would like our audience actually to just take from this, you know, our webinar today is to actually speak up, even if it's with a shaky, you know, voice or with emotions, just speak up. Because, I mean, that's the only thing that's going to change everything, because otherwise we're just going to be bystanders, honestly. So depending on, what kind of aggression I'm getting, whether it's a microaggression from a patient, whether it is from some of my colleagues, quote unquote, you know, I respond differently. So sometimes it's just as easy as responding via email. I feel like that's way easier than doing it face to face, at least for me. So for example, majority of emails, teen emails coming through the department, all my male peers would be addressed as doctors, you know, with all their academic titles, were being addressed by my first name. So that's easy. I just send back an email and educate everyone that these are actually my titles. And then I don't care if they call me names afterwards or I'm being, you know, aggressive in my responses, but I went to school, right? I did my training. I've been doing sports medicine for 9 years now. And I feel like I gained this respect, right? I own it. But it's way harder when you actually one-on-one with someone and you either a bystander to their conversation while they belittling someone who you work with. And I think it really takes some courage, you know, to try to shut them down. And I've done it a couple of times. It felt good. But honestly, I was really anxious and fearful doing so. When it comes to patients and their microaggression, I just try to educate. If it's towards, whether it's towards me or whether it's towards my trainees, I just put my mama bear hat on and I try to educate them. I would say 90% of my patients, for some reason, would call my female trainees she. So, and I just cannot tolerate that. So I just educate them about medical education, what level of training they are, you know, that they all physicians. And I think that is a gentle way to actually fight back that microaggression. But I don't think there's a good answer to the question, how to approach it. But the main thing that we need to do, we just need to speak up.
Any other panelists have an answer to that one?
I was going to say the same. Oh, go ahead.
Your turn.
I was going to say the same thing with a lot of you guys and Caitlyn, particularly with finding like an ally. You know, I think it's easier when you have someone at your institution who you know is non-biased, is very professional, will go to bat for you. And they, you know, I've got mentors that I use as a sounding board too. I might have them take a look at emails for me for wording. You know, one of the things that I constantly get flack for is I am too Northeast, which, you know, I am out of the Northeast. And so people think I'm too aggressive when I talk. And so now, like, you know, being on a lot of national committees since residency, like when I went in, I had to learn to talk differently. Which is really sad, right? But I would be labeled the bitch, right? And so I had to talk softer, which then I go on the other side of the spectrum because then I'll say, well, I think blah, blah, blah. And then, you know, then I don't sound as firm. And then people are like, oh, well, maybe she doesn't know what she's talking about. So then it like, you have to figure out like that even balance. But I think, you know, I've used mentors as like a sounding board to help me. I've asked them like, where do you think I should take this? You know, I've had unfortunate situations in my training where I felt like I was discriminated against, and, you know, that intersectionality that Carly talked about, you know, absolutely true. I don't know if it was because I was a female. I don't know if it was because of where I was in my training or if it was my race, what have you. But, you know, trying to figure out like, okay, clearly others are also seeing I'm being treated unfairly compared to my colleagues. Who do I need to talk to and how, you know, how do I direct that? But, you know, it's sad that I see some of the social media stuff too. And I've seen really high level academic faculty have issues at some institutions, right? And they get fired. And, you know, I don't know what to do in those situations for those institutions, because I think it's a little harder if you don't have those allies and no one's listening. But then I guess what I tell my trainees too is like, well, do you really want to practice at an institution that's like that?
That actually segues very well into what I was next going to talk about, is especially for younger people who are looking into their start of their career. Do you find that it was you specifically looked in your job search for how equitable or how much value an institution put into, say, like diversity or open-mindedness, or even mentoring, for example, women? Did you consider that for your first job? Did you want to consider it, but there wasn't options? Or what did people think about that for their first jobs or even their fellowship?
That definitely played a big part in where I ended up going for fellowship. There was, you know, the program director and the assistant program director. One was male, one was female. But, you know, the fact that there was a female program director was a big draw for me. And then just the number of female faculty. It was pretty equal where I was. I went to Cincinnati Children's, and I mean, you know, representation can look at, you know, and it can be multiple different things, whether it's gender, you know, like we're talking about, or whether it is your racial group or how you identify. But I just felt like I felt like it was a safe space, and it was a good experience. And then I also could say the same about where I work now, about the amount of women that are part of the orthopedic group. You know, some have families, some don't, but there's just, you know, diversity among the women in the group. So I definitely tend to look for that when it comes to making those types of career decisions.
For me, it was a little bit different in the sense that how I ended up doing what I'm doing now is that they were looking for a female sports physician to work with the university, because they're predominantly, it's all men, and something had clicked there that, and I think it's mostly from the voices of the students and the female athletes requesting a female voice in the room. So that's how I ended up there, which was nice. But that being said, I am the only woman in the department. I'm the only non-operative physician in the department, and the only physiatrist that most of them have ever met. And so that being said, there are some challenges that come with that. And the more I speak with the other physicians there, I realize that they don't even kind of realize that, you know, they don't even realize some of the challenges that we might face, or some of the things like microaggressions, or the need to have certain kinds of mentors, because they've been living in their kind of own space, their orthopedic surgery space, for a while. So, you know, they might not even recognize some of the challenges that we face.
For me, I think I looked for places where I knew I had strong female mentors to mentor me. And my first job, you know, our department chair, she jokes that, well, she's retiring now, but she would joke that she's like my second mom. Like, you know, that's where I did my residency. And we've only had, in our PM&R department, we had only had female chairs. I think she was like the fourth female chair of their PM&R department. It's pretty rare, right? And it was mostly predominantly female faculty. Interestingly, our residency was predominantly male. Historically, it was the opposite. But for me, I think having that mentorship closely at home was really helpful to start off my career, to kind of use them as a sounding board. But I think also when I like talked to different jobs and like negotiated my offers and figuring out what would they let me do? I think also recognizing who was an advocate and letting me take on different opportunities, because I think even if you don't have strong mentors at your institution, you can find other strong mentors, whether they're, you know, #he4she or other advocates for you out there. And if they give you opportunities, is your institution going to allow you is going to support you in doing that? And so I thought, you know, that was really important too.
I think in an ideal world, you know, we'd be able to ask these questions at interviews and get straightforward answers, and find that what we're told on the interview trail is what we experience in real life. And unfortunately, that's just not real life. One of the things that I actually really enjoyed about my interview with my current position is that the diversity and equity, those topics and those ideas were actually brought up by the employer during the interview. So my interview with HR, they said specifically, like, they're always looking to increase diversity. They're always looking around the room and asking themselves, who's not here? Whose voices are we not hearing? And how do we go about adding them to our team? And so that was something that they tried to do intentionally. That was something that they brought up in the interview. When I asked the HR specialist, you know, what is it about this job that you've been doing for the last, you know, couple of years, when she had told me earlier that she had transitioned from another position, I asked her, what brought you here and what keeps you here? And that was one of the things that she said. It's like, they don't just, you know, talk the talk, they walk the walk, and they do it on a daily basis, and they're looking to change that. And I've never been part of a group or seen a group or even conceived of a group of sports medicine or ortho where it's all female physicians. I mean, my direct supervisor is a woman, my colleagues are women, It's fantastic. Our office staff, we have an athletic trainer in the office. Our MAs are women. Our office manager is a woman who is also an athletic trainer. And the previous head of the division was a male, but again, he's working with all these women, and he's actually now taken a more senior position to try to really advocate for us. So I think when you're asking these questions, seeing not just how they or what they say, but how is it that they're responding? What is it that they're doing specifically? What are the examples that they can give you? And then how is that reflected in their departments, in the group that you will be working with, in the office staff that they're hiring? Is that something that you can see them actually living out? As opposed to just, kind of giving lip service to try to quote unquote improve their numbers.
That was great. You guys are highlighting so many great things, like looking for programs where you think the mentors kind of match up with you, making sure that your employers value equity and showing that, not just talking about it. But I do think it's nice when someone brings it up right away, because then you know a little bit about that they're at least cognizant of it. And I also like the discussion that somebody was hired because the physicians realized that caring for female athletes was something that the athletes might desire, having access to a female physician. Like, I know, as originally one of the only females too, but also the only primary care sports doc, sometimes I just get consults from the team physicians for female problems with no other information. And I think the fact that that's all you get shows their comfort level with that. And I think that at least sometimes people recognize that. So I really do appreciate all your great comments. Our last question, I think, before we open up the whole floor, would be, what happens if you find yourself in a job where you feel like you aren't, has anyone been in the job, switch jobs because they felt like they weren't valued, or they weren't in a position where they really felt like the department was equitable, or it wasn't an environment they wanted to be in? And how did you either build something that made you be able to function there, or how did you get out of that? That's a hard question.
I'll jump out quickly, but I do want to hear from our panelists, of course. In the past, when I was in a difficult spot and didn't know who my allies were, I actually just Googled my hospital's diversity, equity, and inclusion team, and I cold called somebody, or I just emailed this lovely woman, and she was fantastic. It was just great. She wanted to just speak openly and call me on my cell phone at a good time. And I just said, listen, I'm confused and I don't know what to do or who to talk to. What are your recommendations? And I think what I learned, well, first of all, I should have reached out to her a long time before, because I just took it upon myself to fix everything. And what I really needed was somebody who understood the institution, somebody who was further along in their career than I was, and had specific training in these types of situations. So any one of us could find ourselves in a very challenging situation tomorrow. And if we don't have the skills, or we don't have the background to make sense of it, we're physicians. So we're like, I'm going to figure this out. I don't care how difficult it is. I can do it. When what we need to do sometimes is just sit back and say, okay, my allies are there. If I don't know where or who they are, what are my best bets? So always go to if you can, reach out to your DEI team. Look to see if there's a women's faculty caucus on campus, and look for people who've kind of been there and done that, who can guide you through that process. And it's wonderful knowing that you're just not alone.
So I could speak a little bit to that. That was actually the reason for my recent job change. From pretty much from the beginning of my prior position, I just felt as if I was treated differently. And I don't know if it was so much that I was younger, that I was female, that I'm a female of color, or also that I kind of have like a no bullshit type of attitude, like, yeah, no, we're not doing that, or like, no, this is the proper way to do things, and, you know, kind of very straightforward in that way. But from the office staff to some of the ancillary services, there were just a lot of issues. And, you know, the institution had its own problems that stemmed. So it was more, there were more systemic problems as well. One of the things that was a blessing for me was my my partner, my work colleague, the guy who had really advocated for me to get this position and kind of reached out to me and discussed this about this position with me. And many of the times where I was asked to do things that my, you know, white male orthopedic surgeon colleagues would not have been asked, despite the fact that we had been at the institution maybe a few months difference. I wouldn't even have to say anything because my my colleague had already called it out and said, like, no, that, you know, that's not appropriate, or she needs to be compensated in this way. And he, to straight up to the point where he like straight up, you know, he just like straight up said, would you have asked, you know, Dr. So-and-so to do this? So there were, you know, a few instances where there were awards that several of us had received, and I was kind of left off of the list of recipients. And an email went out very quickly, like, this needs to be resent because Dr. Jones was left off, and, you know, like, I want the website updated and whatnot. So to Dr. Poindexter and Dr. Mooney's points, like finding your allies, finding your team, whether it's DEI, whether it is somebody who's a colleague, whether it's somebody in a completely different specialty, completely different department, completely different field, people that can speak up for you and that can advocate for you is just incredibly important as far as making sure that you're taken care of, that whatever injustices you might face, that those are handled appropriately. And really just to kind of prove to yourself that you're not crazy, you know, you're not making this stuff up in your head, that this really is not okay. And then really, when you find yourself in that position, just knowing your self-worth and knowing like you deserve better, you deserve more, you deserve to be treated with respect and to work with people who value and you appreciate you, and taking those steps that you need to put yourself in that environment.
I don't know if anyone else has any comments for that. That actually was a fairly common topic at the Women in Medicine conference, was people who felt like they were either not respected or not treated appropriately. And a lot of them had left their career and got leadership positions elsewhere. And I think I wanted to highlight that mainly because while I think it's important in the job search to look into those things, not everyone has the flexibility necessarily to have a very large job search and might find themselves somewhere where they don't feel like all of these things are taken into consideration. But there are things that you can do at your own institution. And hopefully, I think the most important thing, and also highlighted by Dr. Day, the he for she sort of thing, we can't change this all ourselves, but most likely there probably is some sort of ally at your institution. It might be hard to find, but I think even if you're a young physician just looking for your first job and you find that the first one's not ideal, there's certainly things that you can do to either look in your institution or possibly look outside. I think also what was interesting is our first ever early career blueprint series was a he for she talk. And when we asked this question to our two male panelists, they said if you don't have that at your institution, that basically, they really highlighted that most likely if you're interviewing, then that's not the right place for you if they're not valuing women. But I think this panel kind of shows that sometimes you can navigate it. Any other comments on that?